There are a number of IDEs to choose from, and since we are Google developers, we will utilize the powerful Google Collaboratory. We'll just simply search and click, and there you have it. You can click this one if you want to create a new notebook, but as for me, I already have created one, so I'll just simply click it. If you want to know more about what Google Collaboratory is, just simply search this one, and then it will answer, or it contains the answers most of your frequently asked questions. Okay, now let's proceed with the demonstration. Before anything else, we will start importing the fundamental standard Python libraries. We have pandas, matplotlib, or matplotlib, that depends on you, and also Seaborn. For pandas, it provides a high performance, easy to use data structures and data analysis tools. And then for matplotlib, it is a low level data visualization and graphical plotting. For Seaborn, it is actually based on matplotlib, which is why it is a high level interface for drawing attractive and informative statistical graphics. I also imported the library warnings since we don't have that much time. And it's also not that pleasing to the eyes to see a lot of warnings here. But if you want to try removing this, you can also explore. Loading the data. In this phase, we are going to acquire and import the data here in our Google Collaboratory. We'll just simply run this block of code, and then we're going to choose the file that we want to import. For me, this is the dataset. I'm assuming and hoping that everyone had already downloaded the zip file that we provided, since it contains the sample code, or the .ipynb, for you to easily follow this demonstration, and it also holds this dataset as well. So for those who haven't, I'll be giving you a short time. Five, four, three, two, one. See, that short only. Okay, so it states here that we have already imported our dataset, and let's just refresh, and voila, we can see it here already. Since we have imported it already, we'll now read the data. You'll just simply copy this one, but since I already did, I'll just simply run this block of code. As you can see, there's nothing printed in here yet, because what it does is that it stores the data set, this one, whatever is inside this CSV file, it is stored into this variable, the DS. Again, the variable, it actually depends on you. I just inputted DS since it is short term for dataset. So it depends on you if you want to put your name, but to make it more easy, especially since we're going to use it a couple of times, since we'll be calling this variable since it contains our dataset. So I advise you to use a relevant variable name. Now we want to know what is inside this variable. For us to be sure, of course, we can run by simply, oh no, I'm sorry. By the way, if you want to add text, you just simply click this one, plus text. Or here, you can also click here, but going to add a code. Again, we want to know what really is inside the DS. Remember that Python is case sensitive. So if I run this block of code, it will give me an error and states that DS is not defined, since of course I used it in a lowercase, the variables. If you're going to trace back, you cannot see the variable DS or the capital DS. But if I'll rerun this one with the lowercase, it will show all the variables. So it states here that there are 218 rows and 2 columns, the index and the value. But if we want to know or see the first 5 or the head of the data, why I said it is the first 5, since the default value or number of rows to be shown when we use the head function is 5. You can also input here depending on what number or how many rows you want. So let's just say 3. It will give me only 3 rows. As for the tail, if we want to look at, what can be the last year on this data set or the last row? It has a default value of 5. So it will give you 5 or the last 5 columns from the data set. But then again, if you want to, let's say 4, then it will give you the last 4 values from the data set. Then you can state rather that okay, so the last year or the last quarter of this data set is year 2010 quarter 2. By the way, Python has many applications or use cases, but what I'm trying to show you is the application or the approach of data science. So what this demonstration is about is more on using Python in the data science approach or in the data science field, wherein we're going to explore the data, analyze its mean, median, and mode, and also analyze or interpret what the data says. Okay? Okay. Perhaps you want to know the length or how many number of fields are there in the osbeer.csv dataset. Although it is already outputted here that there are 218 rows and 2 columns, the index and the value, but if you want to just specifically know the length or the number of fields, then you can use this function. In a function, you can see parenthesis, and inside the parenthesis is called the parameter, which means what do you want the function to do. And again, for this one, we want to know the length or the total number of fields in that specific dataset. And why is it DS? Again, tracing back, the dataset osbeer.csv is passed and stored into the DS variable. Okay, so now you can see that we'll keep on calling that variable, which is why we need to make or you need to name a variable as shorter as possible if you don't want to make it time consuming, since we will be retyping it a lot. Also, just for you to easily remember it. Kasi if you'll use yung mataas na variable name, aside na mahirap siyang i-recall, it will be time consuming pa kasi itatype mo palagi eh. Okay, it has an output of 218, which is correct. Now, let's identify the data types that are present in the dataset or in the DS. As we can see here, it states that the index column has an object data type, and for the value it is int. If we want to check it or recheck it to verify if the data types outputted are correct. So first, the value data type, the value column, it is correct, it is an integer. And for the index, it's called or classified as object. Why? Because it has an integer plus a character or a string type or a string data type. That's why it is classified as an object. By the way, for the conversions, we can use this block of code. Or this is how we convert such data type into another data type. And the following are what's acceptable in conversion in Python. So if I'll run this one, since hala, kuan man di ay ning index kanang object, gusto na ko siya himuon o kanang integer. But it is or it states nga error na siya. Because you can just basta-basta convert any data type into another data type. Dili man pud ni siya ma-consider good bisag unsaon nga integer. Why? Again, kay naa man ning character. Characters, if you can recall, are letters or words like the hello world. That's a string. String is a data type composed of characters or letters. So, kani siya, consider na gyapon ni siya as character or string kay letter man siya. So dili gid ni siya mahimo nga number. And if gusto gid ninyo ni siya nga bulagon, we can make that happen in the later part, which I will show you. But then again, please remember this one na you can't just easily convert another data type into another data type. There are a few considerations. But if you want to explore, please feel free. Like this one, we want to convert this float. If you want to try lang ha, we'll convert this float, the 5.0, into a string. And when we say string, kailangan ang output ani nakasulod siya sa quotation mark, either double quotation mark or single quotation mark. And there you have it. Nakasulod siya. So, considered na ni siya nga string. But if you want it to convert into integer, again, this is a float since it has a decimal point. So, integer, kinahanglan wala na ning decimal point. Be. And there you go. So, ana lang. Try to explore more. For this function or block of code, if dili pud ninyo gusto nga magtagsa-tagsa pang on ang length, ang data type, ang sulod nga columns, if you want to have an info or summary, then we'll just use this function. Again, ds is our variable. So meaning, kwaon na to ang information sulod ni ds or ni osbeer.csv nga data file. And it has an input, kung pila ka entries, diba, nausa na niya tanan, na-summarize na niya. Nga, okay, so naaday 218 nga fields, and there are 2 columns. And the columns pagyud are outputted here, ang index and ang value. And aside from that, it has here its number of fields or number of rows. And then, napagit siya null count. Saan yung null count? Mo ni siya ang counter if ever nga kanang pila ka buok ang null values nga naa within that column. Column is also called or known as an attribute, but I'll just keep on using the word, or we'll just stick on the column term para dili na pud kayo libog na sa ato ang utok. Okay, so it states here that non-null, meaning walay null values sulod sa index nga column and sa value nga column. And again, gipakita pud here ang data type, which is just the same when we use the function dtypes. So basically, na-summarize na gid ni info tanan information na imuhang kailangan. if wala pa jud kay salig atong info nga function and gusto gini mo may balaan or you really want to make sure if wala pa gid na values more too good to be true man kayo, clean ra kayo ang data. So we'll run this function, the isna and the sum kay kwaon man nato kung pila ka buok, so i-add niya si isna is more on identifying null values within that column or within those columns that are inside the DS nga dataset. And here you have it. It has an output of 0. So meaning, 0 gidi ay non-null gidi siya. And of course, mana naman ta sa pagbasa sa data and explore unsay sulod sa data. It is now the data cleaning phase. Ato na sang hinloan ang data para ready na siya for visualization and analysis. And in this part or in this phase, we have series of data cleaning functions, which I'll explain one by one. In this part, you can see here na ato ang gi-drop ang column nga naay null values. But luckily sa to ang dataset, walay column man dito nga naay null values, diba? If you can recall here, it is 0 ang total count sa null values per column. Meaning, wala ra gyapon mahitabo ani, wala ra mawala nga column. But then let's see, if wala bagid kahay mawala. And then after that one, we have another function. For this part, diba, atong problema kaganina kay dili to nato ma-convert si index nga column. This one. Dili nato ma-convert si index nga column into an integer rather. Dito siya ma-convert kay of course naman yung character nga Q. What I have mentioned kanina na ato ay gining bulagon. Bulagon nato si year ug bulagon sad nato ang quarter nga label. What's happening here is we are creating a new data frame. Nag-create ta og bag-o or separate nga column. And ang name niya is year. And what's inside here is the index or asa nato siya ibutang. And always remember that in indexing, it always starts with 0. So, ang pinakauna, 0 gid na. You'll appreciate and understand this once we will run this block of code or mapakita na nato unsa ang output or unsa na ang nawong sa bag-o nga dataset. Okay? So, same goes for here nga at nagbuhat pud ta og bag-o nga column which contains the quarter. And nabuhat naman nato tong bag-o. So, ang mahitabo na dire is i-drop na nato ang column nga index. Kay redundant naman kay siya o dili naman siya magamit. Okay? So, if useless na, buyin na. Char. Okay. Moving on. So, ato nang i-update ang ato ang data frame, storing it again on the DS variable. Meaning, ang sulod or ang dapat nga makita once we run this function or this code, dapat ingani ang output niya. Ang column nga makita is si year, si quarter, and si value. Let's see. By the way, what's amazing in Python is that it will run all the functions or the block of codes that are inputted in this single cell. So, kani sila, wala man ni sila yung mga output, kaya wala man tayo i-print. So, as expected, sa diri na nga part, sa printing na nga part, ang naay output. So, diba, as what I have stated, kailangan, kung unsay nakabutang diri, maupod ang makabutang diani, which is correct, and they are the same. So, 0 man, 0, siyang pinakauna. Si year dapat ang pinakauna, which is correct, na satisfy ang condition. And for the quarter, dapat ikaduwa kay 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So, siya na ang nahimo nga ikaduwa, si quarter. Okay, so na-update na, di ba? Atong una is index lang og value. So, for this part, ato na silang gibulag na si year, si quarter, And si value, ngano magibulag nimo ate Ada? Pansari ang use ana? You'll see once we'll reach the data visualization and analysis part. Moving on, di ba sa to ang statistics, when we have a data, ato din na siyang kuhaan o mean, median mode, or standard deviation, and quartile, and unsa pa na nga mga statistical methods. So, said ato ang manumanuhon no nga 218 year ba ni kabuok. So, instead of manually solving it, we can just simply use this function. And once we run it, it will give us an output of the values sa mean, standard deviation, ang minimum nga value, maximum value, and the quartiles. And if you've noticed, value lang nga column ang naa. So, ngano kaha? Kay diba si year, although year is an integer, pero namang repeating values dadto. Kay gikwaan man siya per quarter. So, meaning, ang value ni year nag-occur ikaupat. So, nga naka-smart ni si Python. And kanipod nga function. Okay? Arasto? Arasto. But, if you just want to know, or gusto ni mo nga, ako naman akong gusto may bawaan si standard deviation raman. So, no worries. Ato na ning ibutang DSSTD. And, there you have it. So, it has a value of 85.88 something. And data type niya is float. Float kay it is in a decimal form. Down to the last phase of this demonstration, ang data visualization, which is of great help for data analysis. What's happening here is we are creating a graphical representation to show the distribution of the dataset. So ang visualization ani nga to ang gamiton is histogram. If you want to add a comment, which is kanisha o kaning mga green, naka-green, just use naka-green. Simply input hashtag and then write the term histogram. But if gusto po ninyo nga naka-text siya, can directly input here, histogram. By the way, if you've noticed na every time I run, dili na ako gina-click somewhere here nga i-run. Instead, I use a shortcut Shift Enter. So just click your keys, Shift and Enter, and it will automatically run. For the text part, you can explore nga gusto niyo naka-bold or naka-italicized and naka-toggle, which is like this one. Yeah, so I'll leave that up to you. Okay, so moving on, when we run this, tada! Mani itong histogram sa beer value. So, makita na nato diri, ay nga ni di ang distribution niya. Normally distributed ba ni? Or right's good, or left's good, and other analysis that we can make. Kaning sa bins, we inputted it 55 since the larger the amount of bins, mas better manggod siya, mas granular siya, mas makita nato ang distribution gid sa data. But that depends on you. Pwede ra pod, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Pwede ra pod 34. Kamo na bahala. Pwede ra pod 5 if gusto ninyo nga. Or 3. Gusto ninyo nga gamay rin inyong makitaan. But again, for a better analysis, the granular, the better. Granular meaning mas pino or mas daghan, the better. Okay? Ayun. So, we inputted it 55 kay 55 years man to tanan or ang range niya. As for the color, kamo na bahala. Again, we'll leave that up to you. You can use either ang hex or just simply input blue or ang name. gusto mo purple kay BTS. So, pwede ra sad. Kamo bahala. Make sure lang po na it is pleasing to the eyes. O di siya sakit sa mata. Okay? So, for this part, it's more on labeling. Ang title, just this one. Kani di ay kay histogram of beer value. So, the data set is actually about the beer values in Australia. So, factory ni siya sa Australia. Nagamake og beer. Okay? So, after the histogram, we have the scatter plot. So, scatter plot, this is what a scatter plot looks like, by the way. Ta-da! But for us data science, this is our one of our best friends, ang scatter plot, since it shows us ang trend or ang dagan and also the relationships of these two variables. With this scatter plot, we can make an analysis na, okay, so aning apart from 1956 to year 1977, or approximately 1981, or here, gataas ang sales or ang beer values, especially sa fourth nga quarter. We can see here in our legend, kaning red dots, nga, okay, so ang fourth quarter, mo ni siya ang tag-as og value. And sa diri pod, as observed, si quarter 2 ang gagmay og values, while si quarter 3 ang second, and si quarter 1 ang third, leaving quarter 4 having the highest value. And as the years went on, gataas pod ang ilahang values. But gikan from 1990, we can observe here ang uban kay ni decrease, ni slowly decrease, and ang uban pod kay constant lang or stationary. So how did we arrive in this graph? In this part, kani siya nga line is we are just basically iyahang size. So this is 13 by 7. So you can adjust it according to your preferences. And here, we are using the Seaborn as SNS nga library. So we identified, of course, kailangan man nato i-identify kinsa dito sa column ang X value and ang Y value. Since this is a time series, ang ato ang X value is the year. Since this is our time, as you can see here, 'di ba? Kailangan or dili na din nga part ang katong need nga nganong kailangan to nato bulagon si index, kay kung wala to nato gibulag si year og si quarter, dili na to siya makategorize or classify in this way. Kay si ato ang gigamit nga hue is si quarter. Okay? Munang makita ninyo diri nga, nalahi di ay oo na-classify. Pag quarter 4 kay red, pag quarter 1 kay blue, and kani basis na to ni ang legend. Okay? So that's why there is a need sa kato pa lang nga data preparation pa lang nga stage. Ato nang gibulag daan si year and si quarter. There are other ways pa kung unsaon like assigning dummy variables, pero kato akong gi-present nga pamaagi, that's basically the easiest one to apply and comprehend. Okay? So in this part, ato lang gibot ngan og label. Kay of course, label matters. Char. And kanipod nga part, ang rotation. Why I rotated it? If you can notice here, let's check gani ha if dili siya or wala siya naka-rotate. Tadang! Diba? Dikit-dikit sila. Gubot kay sila tanawan. And bisan pa nga to paning patasan ang ato ang size, sa pa na siya kataas. Dili gyapon niya laliman ka 55 good ni ka years. 55 ka years, so gubot na kaayo ang ato ang graph. So with that, ato na lang siyang i-rotate vertically para naman pleasing po siya sa eyes o makita po na to ang year. Okay? And that's it for our demonstration for this session. So I hope na you have grasp about what or about the basics of Python and how we applied it as data scientists. I hope you have takeaways and learned ang mga bisag basic lang sa Python and how to apply it in statistics or in the data science nga field. In the next session, we will be doing or dwelling more into Python. So please kindly chat here, leave a message kung unsay pa inyong gusto mahibal-an. If you have queries, please ask sa to ang Q&A nga portion. Okay? Okay.